Thank you. We are now live.
Thank you, Sophie, and good morning, colleagues. I'm Robin Tuddenham. I'm the Chief Executive. I'm just chairing the meeting temporarily this morning at Calderdale Flood Recovery and Resilience Programme Board, pending the arrival of our Deputy Leader, Councillor Scullion. So good morning to everyone and good to see you all. I will ask Sophie just to confirm if there are any substitutes nominated for this meeting or any apologies for absence.
Thank you. We haven't got any substitutes. We have received apologies from Councillor Swift, Councillor Whittaker, from Paul Swales from the Environment Agency, and apologies for lateness from Councillor Scullion. So if we could formally vote for Robin as chair until Councillor Scullion arrives.
I do, I do see Councillor Patience just joined us, so unless Councillor Patience wants to chair.
Thank you, Robin. Yeah, I'm sorry, I equally was struggling to get in, but thanks for holding the fort. I'm happy to take over until Councillor Scullion comes in.
That's helpful as lead member for flooding. So I'll hand over then to Councillor Patient, and I think we just need to confirm that the board's in agreement with that, don't we?
Please.
Sure, yeah, sure. Just do a brief show of hands.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm assuming, Robin, that you've done a brief welcome to the Flood Resilience Partnership Board thing. So first order of business, are there any substitutes nominated for the meeting, and apologies for absence? Have we done that?
Sorry, Councillor, we've just done that one. Yeah,
sorry.
To item 2, I think, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any, just to go to members' interests, if anyone has anything, then please let me know now or potentially at the beginning of any item. That's fine. It is recommended that the public are open to admission to come to this meeting. I don't see that we do have anyone today, which is fine. So we'll move on to the minutes of the meeting held back on the 1st of April and 1st of July to be agreed as the correct record and signed by the chair. Do we have any comments on that at this point, or are we happy to approve those? I'm just looking around the room for those whose faces I can see, and I'm not seeing any notes of dissent at this point. So I'm going to assume that's fine. Okay. Shall we, are there any things that we need to peer over there that need picking up on those minutes at this point? Not seeing anything either. Okay. So moving on to item number 5, which is an oral report, and it's based on the idea of an appointment of an independent catchment partnership member. Are we happy to move on to that? And I'm not sure who's presenting that particular item. Let's have a quick look around the room.
Sorry, it was to be Stephen Lee, but I'm not seeing him here. So
sorry, it was to be Stephen Lee, but
Okay, getting a bit of feedback.
Sorry, Adrian is here. I don't know whether, Adrian, you've been briefed to do this today. Adrian Gill. Just first of all, to welcome Adrian as our new strategic lead AD for infrastructure. I don't know if, Adrian, you've got anything to say on this item.
Welcome, Adrian, as well. Also see that Councillor Scullion. Welcome, Adrian, as well. Also see that Councillor Scullion has just joined the meeting. So I'm happy for you to pick up from this point onwards. So, Adrian, I'll leave it to you. From this point onwards. Adrian, I'll leave it to you.
Apologies, I've literally just dialed in because I've been having IT problems, so I'm not sure what point we're on and what you're asking me to speak on.
This item is the appointment of the independent catchment partnership member. This item is the appointment of the independent catchment partnership member.
Oh, great. Apologies. I still seem to be struggling with IT, so I lost you for a minute there. So I think at the last board meeting, or perhaps the previous one, we had a discussion about inviting an independent catchment board member to join the board. Discussed this with the core partners of the flood board, and the proposal is that we approach partners for expressions of interest to join the board. We'll then review those expressions of interest and bring back to the next board meeting a recommendation for one of those individuals or members to join the board to represent those interests.
Councillor Scullion, are you happy to take over and adopt that recommendation? Councillor Scullion, are you happy to take over and adopt that recommendation?
That's a terrible. What Adrian said seemed to me perfectly reasonable. That's a terrible echo you've got, Councillor Patient.
I know.
I am struggling. I'm on another device. I've been struggling for about 15 minutes to get into the meeting. My apologies. However, I find that on this device, I don't seem to have any access to any of the usual buttons that you might want to have access to. So I think actually I am unable to chair at this point. So I will hand over to you, Councillor Patient, and I will carry on trying to even find my mute button on this device. I'm so sorry, but these are the problems that technology gives you, even in the state, and even after 2 years, when we should all be very used to it. Actually, these things still happen. So my apologies to the committee, and over to you for the moment, Councillor Patient.
Okay, happy to pick up. I'm very sorry if that echo still persists. I will try and do something about it, although it seems to have gone.
It seems to have gone, actually, Councillor, thankfully.
Thank goodness for that. Okay, perfect. So that sounds like a perfectly reasonable way forward, and look forward to that report coming the next time round. Can't see, again, any signs of dissent at this point. So moving on to the flood and coastal erosion risk management strategy roadmap, and it's a presentation from the Environment Agency. I'm imagining this is you, Jo?
Hi, morning all. I'm in a very similar position to a number of people on this call, in so much that I'm really struggling with my internet as well. So I'm actually on my phone at the moment. I'm hoping you can all hear me. My colleague from our national FCRM team is here, and she's going to actually present the roadmap. If I can introduce Joey to you.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes, welcome, Joey.
Great. I'm just gonna share my screen. Share. Can you all see my presentation?
Yeah.
Great. Let me just make it a bit good. Is that better? So my name is Joey Carter. I sit in the FCRM implementation strategy team in Environment Agency. My team worked on the strategy roadmap. I'm going to give a presentation on that today. Oh dear, I can't see the top. Okay, that's fine. So the flood and coastal erosion management strategy, it has a long-term vision for which is a nation ready for and resilient to flooding and coastal change for today, tomorrow, and to the future up to 2100. We have 3 long-term ambitions to help move the country towards this vision. The first ambition, we want to make places more climate resilient. In the second one, we want today's growth and infrastructure and the future to be more climate resilient and be able to, I guess, adapt to the changes in our climate that we'll see. And the third ambition is we want the country to be ready and able to respond and adapt to flooding and coastal change. So the journey to date, so in September 2020, it published on gov.uk the FCRM strategy, and it looked at a span of 5 years, 2020 to 2026. 2026 is basically the beginning of 2026. And in May 2021, we published an action plan for 1 year only. And in June that just went, we had the publication and launch of the roadmap, which looks to 2026. So in that first action plan that we published, we really wanted to implement the strategy immediately. But what happened? Coronavirus, the COVID happened, the pandemic. There was a lot of significant uncertainty within across the country and within the Environment Agency. A lot of our staff was down to COVID, so we only did 1 year action plan instead of the original 5 years we were hoping to get. So we've successfully completed that, and now a medium term view is now needed. So we have worked with partners, quite varied amount of partners, to develop a roadmap that maps the actions we and they will take to 2026. And 2026, more like the end of 2025, is when we will review the strategy. The roadmap, it will make a big difference. It will help for better protecting and preparing communities by supporting the delivery of the £5.2 billion flood and coastal erosion management investment program we have. We will be taking forward projects and programs that will pioneer innovative ways of boosting flood and coastal resilience. It will be providing lots of training and tools to support and to help practitioners in public authorities to develop the skills and capabilities needed to help better prepare them and adapt to a changing climate. It will be ensuring policymakers and practitioners have the information and evidence they need about the current and future risks from flooding from rivers, the sea, surface water, and coastal erosion. And it will also be identifying lots of practical ways in which flood and coastal investments can contribute to wider priorities, including local nature recovery, carbon reductions, and more integrated water solutions that help with both drought resilience. So who we have engaged with to develop it? So since summer of 2021, we have worked across the EA and with 28 partners across multiple sectors to develop a whole sweet host of actions that will support the delivery of the strategy roadmap outcomes in 2026. And we recognize that all partners and Environment Agency, so it's not just Environment Agency, we really need our partners who we work with to adapt and to improve our resilience to flooding and coastal change. The FCM Strategy Steering Group, which is made up of Environment Agency and our external partners who have actions within the strategy roadmap, they play a central role in developing it, and they will continue in their monitoring role moving forward. So on Ambition 1, some of the actions, we have actions around adaptation pathways, flood and coast resilience and the innovation program. We have actions around environmental land management agreements and local nature recovery strategies. We also have several actions around nature-based solutions and rural resilience partnership. And of course, we have actions for coastal transition accelerators program. We have several actions around improving appraisal guidance and other bits of guidance as well that will help our partners and RMAs. And we have actions around the shoreline management plans and its refresh. And in Ambition 2, under making the buildings and development more resilient to climate change, we have actions around biodiversity net gain and planning for and delivering environmental net gain, flood map for planning and also planning actions as a whole. We have several actions, a lot of actions with working with the water sector, water companies and Ofwat, final cycle drainage wastewater management plans and the draft. We're also working with the insurance sector, so we have a number of actions around that. Again, reservoir, which comes under our asset management. We have actions around that and asset management, sustainable drainage systems. We have actions which include the Build Back Better scheme and a lot of actions around PFRs, property flood resilience. And in Ambition 2, where it says we want the nation to be ready to be able to respond and adapt to climate change. We have actions around developing skills across the FCRM sector. We have a whole suite of actions for improving our flood warning services and how we can include more properties. Flood incident management service and feature service plan also features in the roadmap. We have actions around PAS 2080 accreditation and a whole suite as well around new engagement skill courses that we'll be developing and sharing with RMAs. We have actions around international working for research and sharing information and learning from others. Again, the flood digital services is also linked to flood warning, and we have actions around that as well. Low carbon innovation, pilot trials, and net zero carbon innovation pathway fund. So we also have tried to include and look at reducing our carbon, and we have actions around that feature in the strategy roadmap. And finally, we have actions around risk and investment, and I guess future risk and investment within the strategy. And it looks at National Coastal Erosion Risk Management, NCERM, updating that. We have several actions around funding and finance options, and obviously green finance approaches and training that features as well in the roadmap, long-term investments scenarios, and the NAFRA to the flood risk modeling, updating that. We also have actions around that. So how does this strategy integrate with other government initiatives and how it links? Well, it sits alongside and supports the delivery of the government's 2020 policy statement on flood and coastal erosion risk management. And together, both of them, they call for the nation to embrace a broad range of resilient actions to better protect and prepare against flooding and coastal change. This includes nature-based, avoiding inappropriate development in the floodplain, and better preparing and responding to flood and coastal incidents, being more timely and effective in forecasting, warning, and evacuation. And the roadmap aligns with quite a few other strategies, and some of these are the 25-year environment plan. We have the environment land management scheme, that is actions around that are featured within our strategy. Regulatory cycles such as the water company price review. It's also linked in with the flood risk management plans quite heavily. And I mentioned before the drainage and wastewater management plans. And we also try to integrate and link in the carbon government's net zero strategy. So we do have actions around reducing our carbon and reducing the way we operate as well, reduction in carbon emissions. So some of our successes so far for the quarter, Q1, we have developed a rolling program for updating the appraisal guidance. This will support RMAs to better understand the broader range of actions for achieving flood and coastal resilience and the cost, benefits, and tools to deliver these actions and what is needed. We've finalized with Natural England a shared approach on coastal habitat compensation and restoration through FCRM. This will help us make better use of nature-based solutions and improve the environment through investments in flood and coastal resilience. Syria has published the Natural Flood Management Manual this quarter, and this will contribute to helping all RMAs understand nature-based solutions and their application. We have also worked with Water UK to publish good examples of good practice where RMAs are working together to improve resilience to surface water and drainage flood risk. Water companies will better plan for their infrastructure to be resilient to flooding and coastal change. All local resilience fora have now received feedback on their multi-agency flood plans and compliance with the DEFRA guidance. And this will help to support the need to transform how we prepare and respond to incidents. We also refreshed and published the appraisal guidance this quarter, including aligned advice on the latest carbon prices and carbon to all project teams. And this will help to reduce the carbon and environmental impact from the construction and operation of flood and coastal defenses. And we have developed the full business case for the next long-term investment scenario study. This will give us improved evidence to inform future risk and investment needs for managing all sources of flood and coastal change. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. And if anyone would like to find out more, you can always email my team at that email address.
Thank you, Joey. And Councillor Patience, I hope, discovered my buttons on this device. And
stop share. Great.
If you could stop the share, Joey, thank you very much for that. And I think particular thanks for giving us just a glimpse of the national picture. We don't actually talk much about coastal erosion in Calderdale, I have to say, but clearly, you know, that is an important part of the picture that the Environment Agency are dealing with. And I think it gives us a tiny glimpse of the complexity, the richness as well, but the complexity of targets and of the multi-agency response, the number of organisations that the Environment Agency has to work with. One of the things that certainly we've been looking at both at the regional level and the local level is the way in which our regional and local plans are, of course, informed by the national roadmap, but also where they nest inside some of those national plans, because that's clearly important for funding streams, but also where there's a read across, where from the bottom up, we're also informing some of those national plans and some of that complexity, and taking it down to the local level and trying to simplify it in terms of what does this mean for us? What is likely to get funded? What are the priorities locally, and how does that nest within the national priorities? But I'm going to just hand over to the committee just to for any initial questions for you.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you. Any questions from the committee? Any indications? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you very much, Joey. That was really interesting, and it's good to know that so much work is being done. It mentions that one of the responsibilities you're monitoring closely is the avoidance of inappropriate development on the floodplain. And you refer to a rolling programme for updating appraisal guidance. So I assume that applies to that. So the question is, has this been done for Calderdale in particular? And if so, is it available, please?
I don't think it's done in particular for certain places, but the appraisal guidance, and I can share, I think the link is within the presentation. I can share the link to the updated appraisal guidance. In terms of Calderdale, sorry, that will fit in detail in the flood risk management plan. So the flood risk management plan feeds into the overall roadmap strategy. So I mentioned some of the plans were linked in. So we would be linked in the flood risk management plan for Calderdale through whoever leads on that for the organization within EA.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Patience, Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, further to that point, I know in the upper, I'm going to use the Upper Valley as an example, where I live. I know building on areas in high flood risk, you know, in areas 1, 2 or 3 have been under very, very extensive scrutiny as part of the planning process by the Environment Agency. You know, quite rightly too. I think it's important to remember that, you know, any planning development will be subject to national policy guidelines as well as your own assessment on that. So really interesting to hear about the Sustainable Urban Drainage Guide, and we had some of this at the Syria report at the NFM Ops meeting the other day. I wonder, are there any sort of quick wins or early tasks to allow that to happen, to put a little bit more power back into local authorities' hands in terms of shaping what developments look like in the future, outside of local planning processes, something more akin to a sort of supplementary planning document or something a bit more robust?
Yeah, so I mentioned, you know, I mentioned in my presentation stuff around guidance and tools we're developing. So we'll be in conjunction with the RMAs and the local authorities who our officers will be leading. We will be creating what is it? I think it's a sort of like a digital platform. They want a new digital platform which will be knowledge based, and it will sit all these guidance and tools with respect to planning. So it wouldn't just cover the drainage stuff, but it will be looking, as you said, the development, but also stuff around nature-based solutions, environmental net gain. So it's this, yeah, it is going to, it's when did it, I'm thinking about the action. So it's not going to happen now, but it will take some time. But we are working to develop all these tools and guidance and engagement skills to share with RMAs, who will go on to share it with the local authorities. So there's something, just as you mentioned, within the roadmap. The roadmap is actually made up of over 260 different actions. And those are part of some of the work we'll be hoping to complete by 2026.
Thank you, Joey. That's really helpful.
I could also, if you are interested, I could also share an external link to the roadmap and the act. I mean, it is a pretty big document, but if that's something, I could share it with Jo, and she could feed it back to the group.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see anybody else indicating, so I'm going to say thank you to Joey, and we look forward to seeing some of the further unfolding and developments underneath the National Roadmap. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Item 7 then, Calderdale Climate Action Plan 22 to 25, and I think unusually that's you, Councillor Patient.
I think it may be me. I wonder if Issa is also on the call to sort of, and Sam to co-produce.
Sam's here, yeah. Sam's here.
Sam's there. Right. Nicely delegated, Councillor Patient. I believe this plan is out for delegation at the moment. Consultation. Sam, do you want to come in as the and introduce the item for the members?
Thank you very much. So we've sent the presentation in advance, but I'll pull it up, and what I might try and do is canter through it reasonably quickly, just so I can maybe try and bring it to life a little bit, and then happy to have a discussion and listen and get the committee's thoughts.
Thank you.
Let me just find the right buttons on Zoom. It's funny how you get used to one format, and
absolutely,
that's been Teams for me recently, but here we go. Oh, let's hope that's the first slide. Yep, that should be there now, I think. Grand. So the Climate Action Plan is 22 to 2025, and I'll take you through some of the content of that now in brief form. So just to set the context, as we all know, climate change is a significant kind of existential threat. It's something that is international. Every month, I feel like we're seeing new scary extreme weather around the world, including here in Calderdale. Climate change is exacerbating local flooding. We saw wildfire warnings this summer, and we really need to act now to protect our home, and also in partnership and in concert with other people locally, regionally, and even globally, to turn the situation around. So the good news is that we've actually done an awful lot on climate already. We've declared climate emergency. We've set our ambitious targets to be net zero by 2038, and that's in line with the climate science and what that tells us we need to do to avoid a catastrophic climate breakdown. We've modelled an emission reduction pathway, which shows us how we can make those reductions. And based on that sort of long-term strategic pathway, we've developed this 3-year climate action plan that looks at the key actions to take in the next 3 years to get us started and moving towards this net zero future. Guiding this work is very much the Calderdale Climate Action Partnership, so they provide direction and support. It's led by councillors and cross-party councillors. We've also got key community partners like Together Housing, the NHS, Slow the Flow, Friends of the Earth. Key council officers are there. And when it came to the action plan, we brought in experts from across the council in all of the different subject areas to really make sure that the ideas were grounded in a bit of reality and practicality. So in terms of where we're up to, we've had that co-production phase of drafting the plan. At the moment, we're in this consultation phase. And when that's over, we're going to basically review all the comments. And I do think we will need to do some redrafting based on what people think of the plan, and to then move forward and have a final version that we adopt and then publicise and do more engagement on. So these are the key themes that emerged from the working group. We've got a sort of central shared voice function. There's community climate action, warm and resilient buildings, green economy, transport and land and nature. And I'll take you through these one by one so you can have a bit more of a feel of the flavour for what's in each section. So shared voice is very much about setting out how we'll work together to inspire and champion action on the climate emergency. So we want to make sure our partnerships are as strong as possible. We want to make progress and make sure that what we're doing is visible, collaborate with people, not just locally, but also within West Yorkshire and potentially even across the UK. So there's learning from all sorts of other councils and community experts that we can bring in. And we want to just make sure we're embedding climate action everywhere and that other organisations are doing that too. We're working in concert. Community climate action, next up. Sorry, I think the sequencing on some of my bits isn't what I expected, but the community climate action theme sets out how we'll work to inspire positive action. So this is really about, I guess, broadcasting and partnerships, but more specifically with the community. So the previous bit was about core strategic partners and partnerships, and this bit is about everybody in Calderdale, all of our communities. So we want to have advice hubs out in the community so people have got a place to go to and someone to talk to about their questions on low carbon. We want to really spread the word and make that quite high profile, help people to build sustainable lives in just sort of some of the basic things about what they're buying and the food they're eating and to understand how that impacts on climate. And we want to support communities to take action themselves. So it's not all about the kind of council coming in as big brother and telling people what to do. It's genuinely about enabling the ambition that already exists in our communities and helping them to just do the things they already want to do. And a key part of that is helping people to develop neighbourhood climate action plans. So to think about what will work best for each place and what each locality thinks is a priority, and supporting people to then just deliver that ambition. I didn't know if someone wanted to interrupt there, but if it's okay, I'll keep going and then pause at the end.
Keep going for now, and we'll have a discussion at the end. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Councillor. So warm and resilient buildings. So this theme is about making sure that every home and actually every building in the borough is warm and resilient, and we do mean flood resilient and extreme weather resilient. To make sure we're low carbon, and obviously in the cost of living crisis, I think that's more important than ever. And everybody really understands now how critical energy prices are, and that's got a big impact on health as well. I'm sure a lot of people are having conversations about what this winter might mean for people who have health conditions and need to keep warm. So the climate emergency is really actually one of the solutions to that problem. So the key actions here are making sure that there are solid financial foundations for retrofitting buildings, because sometimes some of these interventions can be expensive, but there are things we can do on that. We need to make sure that good advice is easy to find so people can get the right solutions for their buildings. We need to actually have live projects that people could go and look at to see what retrofit looks like and how it actually does make a real difference. And then we also need to make steps towards making sure that low carbon homes and zero carbon homes and neighbourhoods becomes our standard in Calderdale, and it's simply what we expect. We've also got to continue to do the really important work around flood grant and flood resilience. Green economy, next theme. So this is really all about how we make the most of the opportunity that is there in the zero carbon transition. So we need all sorts of new jobs and skills, and there are all sorts of green technologies. So we need to support businesses that can actually deliver this zero carbon transition, make sure we're growing the right green jobs and skills. We need to support businesses so they can do things differently, but also celebrate that business as a part of the solution, and that their innovation and their creativity is part of what will deliver the zero carbon shift for us. And renewable energy projects are really key as well as a an income generator and a source of revenue and a source of cost saving. So that's really critical. And again, that links to the cost of living crisis and our reliance on energy imports and our need to actually be more energy independent as a way to help our economy. Next theme is transport and getting around. So that's really about tackling pollution and improving transport choices. And the core goal is that we need people to be able to get where they need to go without needing a car. So we want to create streets that work for everyone, including children and people with disabilities. Think about green streets and tree planting so that we've got that climate resilience at a street level. We really need to have a strong voice on public transport decisions so that people have got a good public transport option, because they won't leave the car behind unless they have an alternative that works. We need to make sure we've got good infrastructure for cycling, e-bikes. We've talked about mobility hubs, which could be really key in terms of joining up transport options and letting people make efficient journeys. We want to make sure that car club providers can expand so that when people need a car, that there is a car club option for them rather than private car ownership. And we really want to make sure that electric vehicle charging is accessible and affordable to everybody. And it's not just sort of one of these things that is for rich people, but genuinely that technology shift is something everybody can access. In terms of land and nature, really key theme, and I think you as a group probably really understand this one already, but it's about restoring and creating wild places to reduce flood risk and have carbon benefits as well, whilst also protecting our plants and insects and the amazing biodiversity we have here in Calderdale. So we want to create an ecological emergency action plan by next year, restore peatlands, support slow the flow and all the fantastic natural flood management that's happening, help farmers to understand what their role is, because their land interventions and the way they manage land does impact on that land's ability to sequester carbon and the carbon emissions that come from agriculture. And we also want to play our part in supporting the White Rose Forest project, which will absorb carbon and again create lovely landscapes for people and biodiversity. Just in terms of the sort of mechanics of the consultation, we've really just launched. So it's open until the 20th of November. We've got a questionnaire for members of the public, but there's also a sort of broader questionnaire that a group could take, and it has more open-ended questions. So we've got both of those available when they're needed. And we've got a comms plan, which Laura, who's on the call, has been working really hard on with Janine. And as a team, we do have a plan to get out and try and get to a variety of events across the borough to make sure that, again, as I said right at the beginning, we're not just talking to the usual suspects, we're talking to all sorts of people across Calderdale, and we'll be monitoring how we're doing as we go in terms of, are we getting the representation that reflects our borough? Our ask for help today is really all about that consultation. So are there any key people or groups that you could help us get in touch with? Are there any events you're going to where you could raise awareness of this or that you think we should get to? And can you do anything to encourage people to respond to the consultation? I've really flown through the themes today, but the action plan has far more in. It's got case studies of local action and really amazing details about projects that are already happening on the ground. It's also got thoughts on what people could do straight away after reading the action plan. And it's got targets, so specific dates for different objectives within the plan are set out. So there's a lot more there for anyone interested. We'd really love to get your thoughts and also to get your thoughts on where we go further with the consultation. That's everything. I'll bring the slideshow down so I can kind of see people again, and really happy to take any comments and hear what you think.
Thank you, Sam. And that was as promised, actually. It was highlights and a quick canter through, and really appreciate that. And it is fantastically interesting, although it is, again, very rich and complex. But nobody said it would be easy trying to get to net zero. And, you know, all levels of government and organisations are finding that, and indeed individuals, as you said. I just wanted to put in my tuppence halfpenny worth, or whatever the metric equivalent is, in terms of youth in schools, of course, but making sure that our own youth council that we have as Calderdale Council is one of the organisations to have dialogue with, and likewise with older people's organisations. And I was pleased to see, as somebody who represents a semi-rural ward, I was pleased to see mention of farming I actually think some of the rural issues that we have here in the council, in the borough, don't necessarily get enough attention. And so that work with the NFU and others in terms of looking at some of the issues, particularly to do with hilltop farming. And my last point, that's more than tuppence halfpenny, is really about the role of taxis in the transport bit. And I'll put all this in my response to the consultation. But actually, taxis should also be thought about alongside buses and walking and cycling plans to make sure that people can give up their car if they want to, but also that taxis, we should have in each community a disabled accessible taxi that can take reasonably sized wheelchairs. And that's another part of people actually looking at their carbon footprint and their carbon reduction. So I just wanted to get those bits in before anybody else. But I see Councillor Patient has indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just firstly to reiterate my thanks to Sam, Lauren, Janine, and all the team, because it's not just happened overnight. Putting this together, it's taken off a lot of work and consultation and meetings and comms plans, and I'm sure if you do go online or on social media, you can't move for various opportunities to sort of feed in. I think if you do go to the page as well, there are opportunities to connect in real life, not just digitally. Some events are listed on there, and I know Sam and Issa were at the food gathering yesterday, sort of dragging people in and encouraging them to sign up. So I mean, I'm not going to steal Richard's thunder here, because I imagine I probably know what he may or may not say. But clearly, I think what's important to remember is that this is a draft plan, and a draft plan gathered from various organisations, including Youth Council, Councillor Scullion, just so you know that they are key to pulling this together. But it's really important that all those partners out there, and I guess to encourage them to feed in individually and organisationally is really important as well. So we get a wide breadth of feeding at this point. I was going to make a point on railways and some stuff that's beyond our power, but I think that's where the shared voice stuff comes in terms of lobbying, in terms of speaking from a single position. Anyway, I'll stop taking up enough time and let other people come in.
Thank you. I've got an order. I've got Richard and then Toby and then Councillor Lee. Richard.
Hi, thank you very much. That was an extremely impressive presentation, and it does your team proud to see so much hard work and local engagement with so many communities. It's exactly what you need to do to get our green solutions. I picked up on the point about the transport and getting around naturally. You want a strong voice on public transport decisions. The notes I just scribbled down is, what does this look like? What do you want to see, and how can we help?
Thank you. If I could come back to that one really quickly, I think there is a specific point in the action plan where we say we want to actually work on a specific influencing strategy. So maybe coordinate a group of people and work out what our core asks are for who. And I think we've set a date for when we want to try and do the strategy by. So it's not that we've got that already, but we recognise that we do need to spend some time on that element. So yeah, it'd be great to work with you on that, Richard.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my contact details should be on the invite, so if you just want to address me directly, and then I'll try to help as best I can.
Okay, thank you. Toby?
Thank you, Chair. That's really good presentation, Sam. Just to have an insight of sort of what Calderdale is doing in climate change. I'm just sort of on top of what Richard's saying. Potentially, I work sort of across sort of the northwest region, sort of the Calderdales in terms of project-wise. If there's anything we could help, or if you want contact in terms of sort of project where your focus are, potentially we might be able to sort of put you to the right people with the proper right project. Ultimately, sort of line them up potentially, sort of obviously sort of the transport sectors. Anything that we can help on sort of getting people mobility around, that would be wish we could help. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I noted in your presentation the pic of Hebden Bridge Station and somebody with a mobility vehicle there. So that's a good start. And and thank you to Toby really for that offer, and indeed Richard. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question or an observation for Sam, but in reply to what Richard and Toby have just been saying, I strongly think that we should reinvigorate our efforts to lobby for the electrification of the Calder Valley line, notwithstanding the repeated disappointments we've had with funding being withdrawn by the government. I still think it's absolutely worth arguing and lobbying, even if there's no money on the table at the moment, because I think it's absolutely essential that we get that electrification job done. And it's also of great strategic importance to communications between our area and the outside world, that it's electrified alongside the electrification of the Huddersfield line, so that we've got alternative routes on those railway lines as well. So
thank you. But you had a question or comment on the actual plan, Councillor Lee.
Well, I do have a question on the actual plan. Thank you for rushing me. The question for Sam was on green streets and trees being the standard. You just said, and I agree with that. I think it's great. Can we ensure that the plans, however, include that great ambition to have more trees comes with a responsibility to maintain more trees, and that needs to be very much part of the planning process, because we already have some difficulty maintaining the trees we've got. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. You didn't mean to rush. I thought you'd finish that point. And indeed, we could talk about rail electrification all day. And
yeah, well, the question had just been asked. That's why it was topical. And clearly, I'd lost your interest, Councillor Scullion, because I'd not finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. If you have concerns about my chairing, perhaps you could take that up after the meeting. There was no intention whatsoever to rush you. I considered that you had finished that point. And indeed, electrification is something that is dear to many of the hearts of the people in Calderdale. Indeed, very useful article in Rail magazine, not this issue, but the last one, giving analysis of some of the difficulties that the government has had in terms of funding and bringing forward some of the issues in the IRP. But I apologise if you feel that I did indeed rush you, but let's keep the meeting moving forward. And if there are any concerns, let's speak about them after the meeting, rather than delaying our external colleagues. Moving on then, anything else in terms of the climate action plan? No, I fear that debate has come to. Sam, anything you want to say, or Councillor Patient as a last comment on this?
No, just said thank you so much for your time, and hopefully you're interested today, so please go and have a look at the website and tell us what you think via the feedback. Have more of a look at the plan, and if you have any thoughts on people we should be reaching out to or any comments, get in touch. I think Issa, who's on the call, her email address is on our website, so you should be able to find us or find myself. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very good advertisement. It'd be very good if everybody on the meeting could go away and make sure that people are aware the consultation is happening and to take part if they possibly can. Thank you very much. Consider it to be duly launched in this meeting.
Thank you.
If we could move on to item 8 then. So I'm hearing noises off. No? Councillor Patient, were you indicating? No?
No, it's fine. Sorry about that.
Right, okay. Item 8, Flood Risk Reduction and Investment Group, and that's the Environment Agency. And in the past, I might have gone to Adrian Gill, but I think, is it Joe who's taking this item today?
It is me today, yes. Can you hear me all okay?
Yes, we can, Joe.
Yeah, normally Paul would do this section, but he's actually off sick today. He's lost his voice. But while I've got you, I think it would be amiss to just mention the forecast this week. So some of your phones might start pinging shortly, because I'm aware that we will be issuing the flood alerts for the upper and the middle Calder. And then there's going to be potential for warnings to be issued this afternoon for Walsden, Hebden and Mythenroyd. I think the rain is due to start some point soon. It may already be with you in the valley, with it peaking at Walsden at 4 o'clock. So we're not going into any kind of rota. We're sort of not opening the instant room. I guess it's kind of like a standard event for Calderdale, but we've just not had one for a while. So I just thought it'd be amiss if I didn't mention it at this meeting. I think the duty officer will be speaking to the emergency planning team and the wardens throughout this morning as well, just to give the heads up and a little bit more detail than I've been able to give now. So I'll move on then to sort of the headlines from the programme. I'll start with Mythenroyd, as we always do. So that continues to win industry awards. The glass panels should be replaced in October, and the defective coping stones have now been either repaired or replaced. And the cabins have now been removed from the Mythenroyd site. Hebden Bridge, we've got the fluvial design, which is almost complete with the integrated model. So that's looking at both the fluvial and the surface water modelling being completed again next month. The team's identified opportunities for WF mitigation through some modifications to the weirs, and we're looking at the full planning application to be submitted in spring 2023. The project team have been in the town hall for a number of weeks now on a Monday from 10 till 2, and we will be actually opening the formal hub prior to Christmas, which again we'll be able to store more information. We'll be there more often, so if people want to come and find out exactly what's happening with Hebden and the other schemes in the valley, project teams will be there. Excuse me, apologies. Errington, so we've got the Canal Overflow planning application out now for consultation, with the main scheme planned to be submitted in the next few months and construction to start early 2023. Stubbinholme Road, we've got the design works continuing with that and hoping to do a public open day on the design sort of back end of this year. Some good news on Park Road Elland. Managed to secure funding now to revisit the project with partners. So working very closely with Yorkshire Water, Calderdale Council and CRT to sort of review options to reduce flood risk in that area. Designs continuing to be ongoing with Copley and Hebblebrook, and again working really closely with Network Rail and Yorkshire Water. We now have a preferred contractor in place for Shorewood Road, so construction for that project will start before Christmas. Walsden, again, some good news. The modelling is now almost complete, which will then give us the NFM interventions, which are going to most benefit the catchment. So we can start looking at design for that. Again, good news with Brighouse, planning application for the parks is in and due to be determined mid-November. We have started doing advanced works as well under our permitted development along the River Calder. So work in earnest is beginning on that scheme. Selby Bridge, again, fluvial modelling's been undertaken, and we're looking at producing an integrated model next. But Waterloo, the strategic outline case has now been approved, which is great news. So we can then look at options in more detail. And finally, Callis Bridge data collection is complete, which means the project teams are now in a position to review any gaps so the project can progress. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So if anybody's got any questions.
Thank you, Joe. I have to declare an interest, and unfortunately I wasn't in the meeting at that point in the agenda, and I have to declare an personal interest in the Hebden Bridge scheme and in the Errington Hillside scheme, and probably others. And I'm sorry to hear about the flood alert. Not the first we've had recently, is it? And looking out the window, I can see the river is extremely low. So fingers crossed. And I see the note from Derek Ben in terms of being prepared. I only start moving things upstairs, when we're a very long way down the warnings. So thank you for that, Joe.
No problem.
Really pleased to hear the information about those schemes. Any questions about any of those schemes, or more generally about the paper? Can I just say it's important that we understand, and I think, Joe, you've been quite careful in your wording, both in print and in your verbal introduction of that. In some cases, the money that has flowed is for investigation and working up schemes. And there is still a gap in terms of actually having those schemes funded. But I think that is where we, with officers, have a very clear ask really in terms of what Calderdale needs, but we have to make sure that we require the right thing and that the proper hydrology and other works have been done in order to make sure that we don't waste money and the government doesn't waste its money on flooding schemes that create problems elsewhere or are indeed a waste of money. So thank you for that.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Chair.
I'm just going to check. I can't necessarily see everybody at once. No, I'm not seeing anybody who's indicated with their hand. Oh, Adrian, I think you wanted to come in.
Yes, if possible, Chair. It was just to raise a point, really, and this is something I was already discussing with Joe in my previous role, but I think based on the previous items we've had, it would be great now if we could start to incorporate some of the carbon reporting and saving carbon savings into the investment programme. I know that is, you know, for some schemes a very early stage and that data will be quite crude, but I think if we're trying to demonstrate, you know, continued excellence really in this field, which I believe we are, you know, I think when you listen to the roadmap and the national strategy and you listen, you know, to the work on the climate action plan, I think Calderdale is leading on many of these things. And I think something we could do to push it on again would be to start including, like we have the extra columns for properties and businesses better protected, perhaps some of the initial workings around the carbon cost of these schemes and perhaps some of the carbon savings, if only to sort of remind us that that's an important part of everything that we're doing.
Thank you. That's an interesting idea if the metrics are clear in terms of what we're measuring and what we're reporting on, but clearly that's something you would bring back to this committee.
Yes, Chair. So there's been quite a lot of work recently done on the carbon cost and carbon savings, and it is something that the project team should be reporting regularly. So I'm going to stick my neck on the line here and say it's potentially not too big an ask, and it's something that we talk about a lot. So I can have a look at incorporating that. Yeah, and thanks, Adrian.
Thank you. MD else on that one? No. I want to say thank you, Joe, for the report. It's not a thank you for the forthcoming flood alert this afternoon. How weary are we, really? How weary are we of having some of those flood alerts? But on the positive side, I can say that the work that's been done in Mythe and Royd in particular has given a great deal of community reassurance. And the work that the flood wardens have done in terms of clear communication has actually given a lot of community security, really, in terms of feeling that they can get trusted information. So, yeah, fingers crossed for this afternoon. And
apologies to be the bearer of bad news.
Yeah, my phone hasn't rung yet, but phones will be going off very soon, presumably. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else. I wonder if we could then move on to the reports under agenda item 9. And the first one is the Community Resilience Operational Group Highlight Report. Katie?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm also quite saddened to see a flood alert, and I think some of us on this call are probably going to have a busy afternoon and an evening as things develop, but we'll keep an eye on that. Okay, so we'll move on to some positives through my group. So one big positive is I've got Flood Re coming to my Community Resilience Operations Group on the 11th of October, which I'm delighted with. I think the whole insurance conversation needs to be reignited, but also they're going to talk about their Build Back Better, which I think some of us on this call will be extremely pleased to talk about, and hopefully encourage members of the community to have a look at the insurance again, see if they can get some adequate and cheaper flood insurance, and actually explore those possibilities and not be defeatist about their flood insurance. And then also that security of having that extra money if they have to claim on their insurance, that they're able to build back better, basically. So they'll be able to put those measures in, which in turn will take pressure off grants, which we know have been tricky for people this year. A lot of people weren't able to access those flood grants after 2020 due to the fact that they had them in 2015. So that is a huge positive. If anybody wants to be invited to that meeting to listen to Flood Re, please just let me know and I will have you invited. That's on the 11th of October at 5 o'clock. They'll be first on the agenda. In terms of things that are happening going forward, and based around community resilience, Overflow had a really successful run throughout the summer with climate action, basically. So a huge cross-section of the community engaged with them, and they've seen a big uplift in different people coming to volunteer, people taking action, people wanting to do things in their own home, which is absolutely fantastic, and it's music to my ears. They're going to be continuing with a whole education plan going into the autumn, which will go out into schools, and that'll be advertised out by the end of October. So you can watch out for that. So that's sort of inspiring the new generation, teaching them about, climate action, what they can do to protect themselves and their homes. So it's great that we're inspiring the next generation. Talking about flood alerts, as we're potentially going to have one today, we had a slight backlash over the last alert that came out. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and we had a couple of messages. Just people are a bit complacent, and we just need to be mindful of this, because the river was incredibly low, so people are not thinking about other ways that they could get flooded, i.e. surface water. And how, I think we talked about this in the last couple of board meetings, but also it comes up regularly in the community resilience group, that how we communicate better the risk of that, and that just by looking at the river, it doesn't mean that they're not going to flood, and just those sort of triggers around that. So we have some complacency around the flood alerts, and we have had a little bit of a backlash as flood wardens. So we just need to be mindful of that and how we manage that going forward, so that we make sure that people are signed up and that they understand the different risks that are out there for them. There is ICASPA running at the moment, and I can send this around to people. They're doing some quite targeted emergency planning, sort of communicating out flood risk, and they're inviting groups of 8 people at a time, and they'll come out, they'll either do it on Zoom or they'll come out and address a group, and that is open to anybody, any group in Calderdale or any collection of people that want to do that. So I can share that information. The Tobberden group, Flood Warden group, along with Todd Tidy, are doing or going to be doing, they may have already communicated it out, their autumn leaves drive, and they've invited other groups to join in with that across the borough for communities to go out and clear leaves, basically, and it's all around flood risk, but also keeping things tidy and assisting the council, with us knowing that there is, we're not getting the gully wagon out as often as possible, and also to get them to report those block drains in. Things that concern me at the moment and the group are, we've had a lack of information out from emergency planning, and this has been a regular ask for me about, and this is particularly relevant today with this potential alert and warning. that we don't have a clear action plan, or certainly hasn't been communicated out, of what will happen if we flood. And a lot of the actions in my plan are business as usual, and we do keep an eye on them, and to make sure that if we were to flood, that all these things happen in the sequence. But things that people are asking about are flood hubs. Are they virtual? What are we doing? You know, and I think it's more of a communication thing. Like, I know that things are going to happen, but it's how we tell the community, you know, where they need to go, how they need to access those services. So I've classed that as slippage on my report, just because I would like some clarity on that. Apart from that, I think that is about it. So lots of pluses, lots of community engagement, lots of resilience happening across the borough, and really pleased about the climate action plan, which I will share widely with my network. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And I'm going to actually bring Derek Ben in here. You haven't indicated, Derek, so I'm giving you notice that I'm about to bring you in. And I think the general point that Katie and others have made about the complacency, really, that, you know, you need to keep refreshing these things. You need to keep working on the slippage in terms of communication. And certainly my experience as a ward councillor is that where you have people moving, where you've got some churn in terms of new residents, that we do have to keep reminding people about the possibility of flooding and the need to be prepared and to have the action plan. Derek, would you like to just make a quick response to Katie's point? But I saw the Chief Executive and others making notes there.
Yes, thank you for that. So apologies to Katie, because I thought we communicated what we thought was a way forward, which is we're actually revamping our recovery plan. So we have a recovery plan which is wider than just flooding, but tends to obviously reflect our risk, which is around flooding and severe weather. And as part of that, there would be a co-produced appendix around the use of flood hubs. So apologies, Katie, that's not being communicated, because I thought those were conversations that were taking place. So I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with yourself outside this meeting. And if I'll get John to set that up, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And good that that's done. I think there is a degree of, because we've done this so many times, people think that it's very clear, and I'm confident that by and large it would be, but let's not leave anything to chance.
Sorry, Chair, can I just say also, then our plan was, because we're doing a winter exercise, is that would be taken into the winter exercise, which is scheduled for November. So whether there's just been a delay over the summer period around communication, I don't know, but I do apologise.
Okay, thank you. Well, it will be sorted. MD else on Katie's report? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Dickinson, please, Chair.
Oh yes, Councillor Dickinson. Sorry, your hand has disappeared off the corner of my screen. Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have to confess I've been doing my drizzle dance for several weeks. So it looks like I've overcooked it. But the point I'm trying to make really is really going to be, again, about communication and create a public awareness, because not everyone appreciates that despite the fact the ground is rock solid still at the end of September, that its absorption is going to be poor, which brings back Katie's point about surface flooding, and that therefore the very empty rivers are going to fill extremely quickly. It's more of a suggestion, really, and obviously we don't necessarily get as much advance warning as we perhaps might like when it comes to the threat of heavy rain and the potential risk of flood that it imbues. And obviously I'm going to be wishing the same as everyone else here that the worst of it passes us by, and that the worst we get is an increase in river levels. But really, I'm just wondering about the scope for a general public information campaign to to remind people that just because it's raining doesn't mean it necessarily goes straight into the ground, and therefore that is why we have a risk of flood. Yes, I think it's not just complacency. I think, Chair. I think partly as well that it is about knowledge, and people don't appreciate that. So it's just that general point I wanted to make, and maybe the scope potentially for a wider public information campaign, so that people, when it starts raining this afternoon, go, right, okay, rather than just automatically assume that everything's going to be fine because the ground is dry. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's a really, really important point. And again, officers were taking notes in terms of some of the need for more of that wider public information. People sometimes say to me, well, I won't flood because I'm on the tops or I'm halfway up the hill. And of course, we simply know that's not true. Some people have had, water coming in through their back kitchen door and out through their front door because it's coming down the hillsides. And as we know, every event is different, and water finds new ways of coming down the hillside. I think Councillor Dickinson's point about greater public awareness is something we really do have a responsibility as a group of organisations to keep plugging away at. And I think it is, but I would agree with him that it is extremely difficult. At the same time as the drought, the national news about reservoirs and our local reservoirs being in such a low state. At the same time, we're reminding people about flooding, and it comes back to the point that Katie Kimber made about getting people to actually not be complacent about flooding events and the risk in our narrow valleys. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. I'm not seeing anybody else. Sophie, can you see?
Chair, sorry, Robin wants to come in. Chair.
Right. Yes.
Thanks. I just reminded, I think Councillor Dickinson's point's really important, and I just reminded of what Ben Page from Ipsos Morris said to me about the point when you're almost sick to death of your communications is the point that people actually start hearing and listening to it. So I think that almost that we should remember that this is now a continuous effort, and there's a couple of opportunities I think that we, aside from the response to this immediate alert, is that we have some key milestones coming up where previous flood events. So we will plan and prepare as we go into the latter part of the year, just to remember and remind our communities and our newly joined communities, because we're now talking about 2 or 3 years for the last one, and approaching 7 for the most impactful one in Boxing Day. But I do think the climate action plan, and Lucy's on the call, I know, so I just sort of note to pick this up with Lucy, but our communications manager is an opportunity to not just consult on the plan, but actually land some messages in various forums. So I think we will do that. The other thing I think we should be doing is we have Winter Wise, which is a communication that we developed with the NHS around a range of things. And I think this year, Lucy, I think we should be thinking about some of the practical messages around food and fuel, some of the interventions that we're taking to support communities around fuel costs, and also the flood risks as well. So there is a chance to get some messages to every household in the borough. So I think we'll take that away as an action, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. Okay, we've had a bit of a go at that report. Thank you to Katie for bringing those issues forward. If we can move on to item 9.2, which is the Natural Flood Management Operational Group. Now, who's presenting this one? Looking to see Adrian. Nobody is claiming this one.
Apologies, Chair.
Nobody is claiming this one. Oh.
Ordinarily, Granville talks us through the NFM paper, doesn't he?
Oh.
I think the chair is you're on mute, Chair. I think the chair is.
No, Granville, I understand, is extremely busy in Yorkshire Water with some of the aforementioned issues regarding reservoirs. Adrian, is there something that you can add to the written report that we've got in front of us?
I don't believe there is anything I can add, Chair. Apologies, I haven't come briefed to add anything above what's written in the report.
Chair, apologies, it's Jo here. I don't know how to use my hand up, but I can just give a very brief update on the Landowner grant scheme. It's that we've recently been running. The closing date is Monday. We've had 26 applications come through, which is really, really, really positive. So Ben and the team will be working through those with support from the EA as well.
If I can, you're on mute, Chair, but if I can just briefly add, I was in attendance of that meeting. I think some of the issues have been covered already. One in the presentation by Joey about the recent Syria report. That was covered in depth. Ditto was, as Joe's just mentioned, some of the issues around and good news around landowner grants. So you've got those numbers there as well. Also, flood action plan. Funding updates were mostly based around WICA funding and various projects being put forward for Calderdale, landscapes for water, was green rag rated, and development moving ahead well. But I think in obviously in Granville's absence, clearly because of the issues with Yorkshire Water and the recent drought and preparedness for winter, some of those issues have been put forward to the next meeting. So hopefully more to report next time round.
Okay, thank you. We'll look forward to a fuller report and perhaps give some extra attention to that at the next meeting. Okay, moving on to the communications group. Lucy, I think that's you.
Sorry, Chair, we just had Katie Kimber waiting to come on the natural flood management.
I beg your pardon. Anybody who's towards the top of my screen, for some reason the hand doesn't show. Katie, do come in.
Apologies, thank you, Chair. Just a quick one on those landowner grant schemes. I just wondered if there's going to be further opportunities for that. So you've had 26 expressions of interest or sign-ups, and if, say, some of those are not successful or they're not appropriate, and there's money left in the pot, will it go back out to the community again to apply, or is that sort of it for this wave? Thank you.
Good question.
I can take that if you'd like, Chair.
Jo?
Yeah, so we with regards to the funding that we bring in for the NFM works, we tend to work with the operational group, so they have an input into how it should be spent. So I think if that is the case, Katie, we would take the that proposal back to the group to get a consensus on it. As I think we're all aware, it has been really, really successful, and it would be a shame to not continue it. So yeah, so I would be keen for that. But again, it would be done in sort of consensus with the operations group and the other partners delivering the work.
Thank you. That's helpful. I'm really pleased to hear about the landowner grants, and we really do have to do a lot more of that, actually, given our particular terrain, geography, and the importance of hilltop farming and other owners on the tops in relation to flooding. Thank you. Okay. If we can now move on to
if I can just briefly add very briefly, it's probably worth noting as well while we're talking about natural flood management, for those unaware, we had a very successful meeting with the new very head of policy at DEFRA, Phil Killingsley, the other day, who came to Mythenroy to see a lot of the work on flood defences. But the second part of the meeting I think was perhaps more important in terms of a walk around Hardcastle Crags and much of the work that Slow the Flow have done in partnership with the National Trust. I think it's fair to say we all took the opportunity to tout how great we are at NFM here and what models can be rolled out more broadly. And hopefully Phil took away some of the asks and opportunities around expanding that funding, around around the availability of clearly so many people wanting to be involved in it, and a very active and ready workforce ready to do some of these nature-based solutions. So I'm sure Robin wants to add to that, so I'll let him.
Yes, thank you,
Robin.
Yeah, I was going to raise it as in any other business, just to highlight that it was a really timely and useful visit from Phil, and I know Phil from before, so it was good to connect with him again. I think within the policy role he has for funding and infrastructure in DEFRA, he is actually the lead on natural flood management nationally in Whitehall, so that's very useful for us. And what we do need to do is make the real connection between what is a modest investment for the impact we get with the impact that we get. And it's the challenge being, it's very hard to disaggregate one intervention from all the interventions that we do. But that's the task, and I think we set the context, and thanks to colleagues, and Katie was there as well from National Trust and Slow the Flow for playing the part in really giving him a chance to see it in reality. So thanks to everyone for their part.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
And we look forward to inviting the minister, the new minister, DEFRA minister, to Calderdale at some point. Thank you. Communications, Lucy.
Thank you. Much of my update has already been covered, so I'll be very brief. Clearly, Janine and Lauren are doing a lot of promotion of the Climate Action Plan consultation that Sam went through earlier, and that will continue to the 20th of November. So do please encourage people to take part in that. This Monday, so the week commencing the 3rd of October, is the first of our Vision 2024 Twitter takeovers. This is where we take one of the 5 vision themes and we talk about it for the week across our Twitter feed, highlighting how the work that we're doing across the place emphasises the particular theme. So next week it's going to be resilience, so you should see a lot on the council feed, but also hopefully our partners too, talking about where we're demonstrating resilience across the borough. Particularly timely as it's the 6th anniversary of the Flood Action Plan, which we've done a press release on jointly with partners, including the EA. So a real opportunity to talk about the work we're doing in this part of the world on flooding in particular. We know that we have to have resilient communities, and each time they're put to the test, they come through for us. And then lastly, Robin's actually stolen my thunder about Winterwise. So we'll be refreshing our annual campaign about being prepared for winter, for the colder months ahead of us. Obviously, flooding is a key part of that, as are the other issues that Robin touched on this year, sadly, with the cost of living. So we'll be looking to update the messaging that we usually use through the lens of both cost of living and, unfortunately, ever-present threat of COVID too. So it'll take us, we'll go through that and we'll share those messages again throughout the winter months. And I would also say I've noted the comments around complacency and flood alert, and I'll be speaking to Lauren and Janine about what more we can do on that. So I'd say those are probably the key things that we'll look at over the next few months.
Thank you. Any questions on the Communications Operational Group Highlight Report? Just checking. I'm not seeing anything. And thank you for noting those points from the meeting, Lucy. Okay, we'll then go on to the final one of the highlight reports, and that's the resilient infrastructure. One of the highlight reports. Oh, and that's the resilient infrastructure. Oh, put myself on mute.
Thank you, Chair. I will
put myself on mute.
No, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Apologies, there's a dreadful lag at my end today. So I'll be similarly brief with the resilient infrastructure update, as there is quite a lot of overlap and synergy with the other groups that have already reported. The group's reporting status as green due to positive progress by the Environment Agency on completing flood recovery work. the completion by Calderdale of some telemetry at 5 sites and progress against the Section 19 reports. So firstly, just taking those Section 19 reports, we have one that is almost now done on the 9th of February 2020 event, a Storm Ciara. We are out for comments at the moment, and that's due to close on the 17th of October, and the final draft will be presented at the next board meeting. We also have another Section 19 report taking place on a flood event that took place on the 20th of February 2022, and a draft will be sent to risk management authorities as soon as possible, but we're currently collating data. I guess an observation from me that I'm sure you will also be making is the time perhaps it's taken to finalise that Section 19 report on the Storm Ciara event, and I think it's fair to say that was a significant event and there was lots to capture. But also one of the things I would like to do in my new role is look at how we can better resource the Section 19 reports and speed up that process for reporting back to members in the community. Moving on, again, a big part of the role of the work that the flood team at Calderdale do is investigating incidents of flooding. And in the last sort of period, we had 39 incidents reported and have been investigated. The team are also working their way through quite a backlog. That backlog has reduced in the recent months, but that's largely because we've had quite a quiet period in terms of flood risk. So again, one of the things I want to work with the team on is perhaps the threshold we set for investigating an incident of flood risk, and again, how we perhaps streamline some of that work, because it's only a matter of time before we have, I guess, more incidents and bad weather, which I suspect will add to that backlog. So we need to make sure that's sustainable and resourced. I mentioned the telemetry, and this is a really helpful thing in terms of monitoring the build-up of trash against some of the screens. So there's already examples of that around the borough, and now a further 5 have gone in at Redwater Clough, Stony Road, Royd Lane, Nutclough, Copley and Jumps Road. Joe's covered a lot of the work that the Environment Agency is leading on, but they've also been leading on on the collective recovery programme since Storm Ciara, £4 million of that being spent in Calderdale. The outstanding projects still to do at Streamside Fold and Callis Bridge and Millwood Todmorden. Northern Power Grid, they're doing some great work looking at the resilience of their substations. There's still one site left to be resited, and this is still under negotiations with respective landowners at Moderna Mills. Network Rail, again, lots of work that they've been carrying out, particular focus on Bridge 96, but plenty already achieved and in the future pipeline. I don't think Yorkshire Water are here today, but we've obviously mentioned them a number of times in terms of the close working on a number of themes, not least Granville leading the NFM group, but also surface water across the borough, and in particular the ongoing work around the reservoirs upstream of Hebden Bridge. I'll scroll right down to the bottom then, because this has been raised in the report. Again, something that I'm keen to better understand, but risks raised now around the lack of resource of funding and managing critical riparian owned flood assets, and lack of resources within Calderdale to effectively carry out asset management inspections. So both of those are something I'll be looking at very closely and understanding how we can better support that or do things differently. And I will leave it there, Chair, and answer any questions as best I can.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Adrian. And for somebody who's been in the job, I think for just a few weeks, that your knowledge of the geography of Calderdale is already quite impressive. Any questions for Adrian? Not seeing anyone. I just want to raise myself the question of the telemetry and the trash screens and so on. I know that Kirk Cleese did a project where they looked at the detritus that was coming into the screens, and whether there was anything that they could do in terms of things that are coming from further upstream, of whether there are any particular riparian landowners, businesses, etc., where, you know, are there tires coming down? You know, can we stop some of the things that are coming and blocking up our trash screens at source by understanding whether it's just vegetation, tree branches and so on, or whether we've actually got another problem in terms of what actually silts up those trash screens. But I suppose it's just worth talking to Kirklees about what kind of things they've found from their investigation in terms of upstream impact on the trash screens that we have. Impact on the trash screens that we have.
I can't answer that now, Chair, but I can certainly take that away and find out what information we've already gathered from the monitoring we have in place and what that's telling us, and also speak to Kirklees and learn from them.
Thank you. Can't see anybody else indicating on that particular highlight report. Thank you. It was a lengthy session, but I think worthwhile really in terms of informing everybody really about some of those particular dimensions. Okay, if we can move on to item 10, and that's the Yorkshire Regional Flood and Coastal Committee update. And I think for the first time ever, I was unable to attend the meeting. However, before this meeting, I did ring the chair and ask him for a report on the meeting. Apparently the forthcoming levy was discussed of what the rate of levy might be. And of course, that's key part of the budget setting for all the councils in Yorkshire and Humberside. And the point was made that, of course, councils are under considerable financial pressure, and therefore the options for the levy should perhaps be at the lower end this year. However, the counter argument is that the levy is often money that we can control locally, rather than the money which comes to local authorities via the DEFRA budget. So some discussion, further discussion to be had on that. He briefed me on the discussions that are ongoing about, with some of the big flood schemes, whether businesses and others can also make a contribution, because of course we know that flooding affects domestic properties, but also affects business properties, and in some cases across Yorkshire and Humberside, large business properties, and whether there are other sources of funding to supplement the central government money and the local government money that's put into those. Discussion about environment and biodiversity, and ways in which we can improve our work in terms of environmental issues and biodiversity. I think, and this meeting has also emphasised this, the increasing emphasis on biodiversity being good for everybody. And of course, flooding is very bad for biodiversity in rivers and just rips everything out. And I think those are the main issues that he reported back to me from that meeting. So any questions or comments? Anything from the officers who were at that meeting? Nope, not seeing anyone. Thank you. Number 11 on the agenda, folks, is then any questions from members of the public. Sophie, were there any questions sent in by email from members of the public?
We haven't received any for this meeting, Chair.
All right, thank you. It only remains for me to apologise profusely for the technical problems that we've had during this meeting. I don't think I've ever had such a combination and so many people having technical problems, but we've got through it. Thank you very much. And